Good morning, everyone. Everyone is very welcome. This is the start of another academic year. And at the start of every year, the Teaching and Learning Unit like to put together a series of talks, seminars, workshops, just to get the engines running again, just get people thinking about the year ahead. I'd like to thank the organizing team for asking me to kick off proceedings this week. I've put together a short presentation, maybe 35 minutes on tips and tricks that I've learned down through the years on getting ready to try and be productive for the academic year. It's by no means the complete article. It's really just kind of a personal reflection on what I try to do to kickstart the year, and hopefully some of you will find some benefit in what I present, but equally I'd be very interested in hearing your own thoughts and comments on what works for you and what are the pitfalls and the challenges for the year ahead. There's a lot of other talks planned for the next 2 weeks from the Teaching and Learning Unit, so no doubt we'll be promoting those as the weeks go on. So just keep an eye on emails and alerts and so on. So my name is Jim O'Mahony. For those of you who don't know me, I kind of split my time between the Teaching and Learning Unit and my home department, which is the Department of Biological Sciences. So just to start off, this is a piece of artwork that we commissioned last year, just in relation to some TLU activities. And every year at the start of the academic year, most of us start in the shallow end, but as the weeks go on and as the pressures increase, more often than not, we do find ourselves in at the deep end. So this morning is about maybe trying to future-proof this not happening, and also maybe giving you some idea of the type of work and activities that the Teaching and Learning Unit do to prevent this from happening. So for those of you who don't know what we do, we're a group of academics and other team members whose job is to try and make teaching and learning a little bit easier and try and enhance the practices that we're all undertaking. So the Teaching and Learning Unit run activities like staff induction, workshops and seminars. We build learning communities, so we get like-minded people working together on shared objectives. We make funding available for individuals and groups who might want to devote some time to enhancing their teaching and learning practice. We run European accredited mentoring and coaching courses, and we also run professional programs, for instance, like the MA in Teaching and Learning. So that just gives you a very quick overview of what we do, and if anything in that little panel interests you, please get in contact with us and we can give you more information on any of those. One of the more recent initiatives that we've undertaken is to try and build together a series of tips. These are short, bite-sized tips. Each one is about a 5-minute read. We've put 10 together. There's just a selection of 2 of them. One on building better classroom engagement, one on making content more relatable to students. There's a little QR code that will bring us straight to that webpage on our TLU site if you want to look at them in a little bit more detail. But they're just short, bite-sized little chunked information that hopefully might be useful to you as you set off on your journey this semester. A series of short tips. At the same site, you'll find lots of other resources that we have in place as well that might be useful to you. So mainly this morning, what I'm going to do is probably cover 2 things. One, planning, and secondly, doing. And as I said, I'm certainly not going to turn anyone into a Jedi Master or in the space of 30 or 40 minutes. And equally, I hope you don't expect me to be one. This is just a kind of a personal reflection on activities and tips and practices that I've learned the hard way that actually work a little bit more effectively for me. At the surface, I suppose anyone who isn't involved in academic work would say that we have quite an easy job because we only work for 16 or 18 hours a week and we only work for 24 weeks per year. So on the surface, it does look like why would we need to plan what is a very straightforward job. But of course, everyone knows that's only the tip of the iceberg. This is just a very short brain dump on the various things that we get called to do on a very short notice basis. Everything from organizing external examiners, preparing lecture lectures, uploading content, going to staff meetings, amending modules, looking after work placement, etc., etc. And I'm sure you'd have your own personal list of what could go up here. So because there's so much emphasis on different types of activities, and there's such a demand on our time, then it's a good time of the year to think about how do we plan to make sure that we're not just firefighting, and that we're actually getting productive work done. I think one of the first things to consider doing is to take a personal audit, certainly for this week when we've got a little bit of time to plan what's ahead. And especially if you've done this more than once, as in if you've gone through an academic year more than once, to think about what do you do well, what works well for you in a traditional academic year, what needs improving. So where are the areas that didn't work so well last year or in the last few years? So where are the pinch points? Where are the times in a semester where you feel overwhelmed, or where your practices or systems start to break down? And then actively thinking about what can you change. We encourage students to do a lot of reflective time on their learning. So I suppose it's equally important for us to take time to reflect on our own practices, and to try and put in place practices that can allow us to be as productive as we can. So first bit of advice would be in terms of planning to think about taking a half an hour or an hour to do a personal audit on how things went for the last couple of years. Because the reality is, a good definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. In other words, if you're overwhelmed or firefighting in academia, then just doing the same thing this year is going to lead to exactly the same results. So that means that there needs to be some emphasis on change. And change isn't easy. There's a lot of talk around change and how to change. There's two books that come to mind. One is by B.J. Fogg, called Tiny Habits. The other one is James Clear's book on atomic habits. They're pretty similar in terms of their core content, but they're both of them are certainly well worth reading. And in order to plan to make a change, B.J. Fogg has made a little bit of good science around his practice of tiny habits, and he thinks that if you're going to change anything, then it's based on two very simple principles. One is your ability to make that change, and secondly is your motivation to make that change. And this green line here is supposed to represent your chances of actually actioning that change. So in other words, if something is very hard to do, and if you've got very low motivation, then it's very difficult to get over that line. However, if a practice is easy to do, or if you've got high motivation, then getting over that line becomes a little bit easier. So his book is about making things as easy and simple as possible to do, and really, really well worth a read. And his philosophy is that really, really small changes added together can make a transformative change. So in terms of your own practices, maybe think about what are the really, really small changes that you can implement that are easy to do and will get you over this action line. So after doing a personal audit, then it kind of makes sense that you would think about how you distribute your time in a typical academic week. And again, asking yourself questions about how effective are you with time management. And most people would argue that they couldn't give any more time. They're already giving 100% of their time and still not getting to effective outputs. If that's the case, then there's probably a question of looking at quantity of time versus quality of time. And we talk a lot about the law of diminishing returns, and I'm certainly guilty of this. Insofar as the law of diminishing returns states that you can give so much input and you get maximum output, and then you give more input and you don't see any output for that. So in other words, if you were spending 2 or 3 hours preparing a lecture, it gets to a point where if you add another 3 hours, you're not really adding a whole lot to it. So the quantity and quality of time that you give to a task is probably something, in my case at least anyway, that I've learned I need to take more attention of. being disciplined with the time and how you allocate that time is really important. And small things like setting reminders for tasks so that you're not overwhelmed with you've got 8 or 10 things to do today. If you've got them scheduled, and if you've got reminders set for them, at least it allows you to focus on one task and not be trying to firefight 5 or 6 different things at the same time. I find that scheduling is probably one of the most important things that we can do. Proper scheduling and proper planning really makes for more effective time management. So with that in mind, and hopefully people are still there, I'm just going to ask you to a series of questions, really simple questions over the next kind of 15 or 20 minutes. And this first one is just to get an insight into whether I'm alone in terms of sometimes running out of time or not maybe planning my time effectively. We might just pause for a minute or so and ask people to take a look at that question. Okay, so just looking at the results coming in, we've got 1921. 14 people always need more time. 7 people just about complete the week and have little or no time to spare. And 2 very ultra efficient people always complete every week successfully and have time to spare. So I'll take a screenshot of that and share it with you later. But by far the majority of people are on number 3. I almost always need more time, with 10 people completing every week successfully with having little or no time to spare. So I'm not alone in terms of struggling with time, and that's why I think it's useful to think about planning our time effectively. Okay. In terms of planning, I'm sure there's people a lot more qualified than I am, probably even on the call this morning, who could talk about planning and scheduling and so on. In terms of prioritizing, that's what this little slide is related to. When you've got 8, 10, 12, 15 tasks, how do you decide what to do and put them in certain order? I like this slide. It's quite old, but it helps you to kind of focus on, if you're planning your week and being effective with your time, how do you do that? And it's done very simply by looking at what's urgent, what's not urgent, what's important, and what's not important, and then being able to put it in each of these 4 little sections. If something is urgent and important, that's obviously a priority. If something is important and not urgent, then you can decide a time to do that. And down here, if it's not important, then either give it to someone else if you can, or delete and eliminate it. So even looking at maybe changing the way in which you go about assigning your time every week and scheduling based on priorities could be useful. When we talk about scheduling, this is just my own personal practice. I have a few different ways of looking at the time that I have to fill it, and one is simply looking at very broad over a semester or 2 semester approach. So this would be the first thing that I would do every year is grab one of these, either a digital version or a hard copy, so that you can see what's ready in the year ahead. The second thing I would do is always have a monthly planner, again, either a digital whiteboard or a physical whiteboard, something that you can just at a glance, just see what are the main priorities, what are the main potential hurdles that you have to face in the coming month. And then at a more granular level would be a weekly diary. There's, again, these are only little suggestions, but lots of people have different ways of compositing information. There's a lot of talk in the last few years about bullet journals, how useful they are. I'm not sure if anyone's used a bullet journal. I've toyed with them from time to time, and I found them quite useful. But just to let you know that there are, again, tried and tested, scientifically validated ways of being really effective with planning, and bullet journaling might be something that you might want to think about for the year ahead. Mine is much less sophisticated. This would be a typical page in my diary. And again, this is not to say you need to adopt this method. It's just from tried and tested practices. This is what I find to be useful. The reason I like this style of diary, on the left hand side you have your week at a glance. It allows me to put urgent information at the top, so things that absolutely need to be done. And then on the right hand side, this is just your list of reminders based on prioritizing, using a method like the Eisenhower matrix, for instance. I try and be disciplined and make sure that at the end of every week, a Friday, this is the very, very last job that I would do. I would make sure that I would set up my diary for the coming week, and do that digitally, and also use it using a physical diary that you can have in front of you. So this is a little bit silly perhaps, but it just gives you some idea of how a typical week might look. Different classes that I would be teaching, put them at different times. So the benefit of doing this is that it allows you to see how much time you have available to do other things. So assuming that we work from 9 to 5 on a typical week, having a diary like this allows you to see, well, I've got 2 hours here, I've got 2 hours there, I've got an afternoon here, and that at least gives you a week's kind of visibility on what's available. And then on the right hand side, you have space to put in this case 66 individual tasks or reminders. Now, if you're putting in 66 individual tasks per week, I'd suggest you probably need to reevaluate your work practices. That's way too much, but having a diary like this does allow you to put in quite a few. You can prioritize. Advice that I would say is that you would certainly need to leave space, because obviously things come up and blindside us that we need to do on a weekly basis. So don't fill up every single one of these on a Friday evening, because if something else blindsides you, then you've got no space. So always leave some blank time. And again, these are just silly things, but it gives you some idea of maybe tasks that need to be done that you're planning to do for the coming week. And then as you go through the week, obviously just put a line through them. There's a really nice psychological buzz and feeling of putting a line through a task. And anything that's left, for instance, here, meetings and updating website, for instance, that gets carried over to next week. It's very simple. It's probably very boring and dull, but it does keep you on track. Now that you know what's important on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. That's my little system. And with this time, to try and get the most out of this time, if we think about what's achievable in a 60-minute exam and what students can produce, talking about really, really good, efficient students, then each hour that you have, there's an opportunity there to do some really, really good quality work. Just want to pause for a second. This is a very short video. It's about 2 minutes, but it does again call into question the importance of assigning time for quality work. And this is just a summary of a book by Cal Newport on deep work, which hopefully you'll find of interest.
Deep Work is a book on the importance of focused work in order to succeed in an increasingly distracted world, written by Cal Newport, author of 5 self-help books and the Study Hacks blog focusing on career success. There are 2 types of work: shallow work that only needs a little bit of your time and focus, like answering the phone or emails, and deep work that happens when you lock yourself in a room for 5+ hours and focus on one thing, completely free of any distraction. A famous example of deep work is Bill Gates' Think Weeks, where he would isolate himself and do nothing but read and think big thoughts. Another example is, a great author can either isolate herself to write a book that will impact thousands and stand the test of time, or she can split her focus into slivers and get busy answering emails or engaging on social media, contributing no long-term or high-value work of any sort. The problem with shallow work is that it's low value and commoditized. Anyone can do it more or less. But what's worse is that the more shallow work you do, the more you forget how to do deep work. Technology, networking, and social media have fragmented our attention too much. As a result, we confine ourselves to feeling productive by keeping busy. In contrast, deep work is how we can create value and improve our skills. The big idea is that our increasing distraction and focus on shallow work creates opportunities for the few who are still capable of deep work. Those who can master their focus can get more and higher quality output in less time, which in turn frees them to produce even more and higher quality output and stay ahead of the competition. We have to actively train ourselves and transform our work habits in order to put deep work, focused, uninterrupted work at the core of what we do. Maybe that means completely disconnecting for a couple of weeks once or twice a year, or regulating our access to social media, or allocating a short window every day to respond to emails. The point is, all these are distractions from truly valuable work we could be performing, and from radically improving our skills. Unfortunately, busyness, or shallow work, is what's used as a proxy for productivity in the business world today. The more emails you get and the more meetings you have, the more productive you appear. But deep work is what stretches your mind and gives meaning to your life. And as deep work becomes more scarce, it also becomes more valuable. That's why deep work is quickly becoming the superpower of the 21st century.
We're talking about deep work. That's what that video was about, and a lot of the time, for sure, we're being robbed of the opportunity of doing deep work, obviously because of such a high demand on our time for doing other things. So just interesting to kind of bear that in mind. This is just an opportunity to look at what is keeping us from deep work. So I have my own thoughts on what's preventing me. I would just be interested to see what single thing is preventing you maybe from accessing that kind of 3 or 4 hour deep work period. I don't have a double screen, so I'm just going to call out really quickly: emails, meetings, emails, too many tasks, preparing and getting my head around things since I'm only new to the job, emails, admin, emails, lack of discipline, fact that we need to be available and contactable by email, or Teams. By far the most common occurrence there is certainly email. So that's interesting. Yeah, that would be my own personal bugbear as well, or the one that prevents me from doing what I'd like to be doing in academic terms. We get to emails in a minute. Just again, we're on the planning side of things here. What can we do to plan maybe to be more effective? This is something that I've adopted as the again weeks and months and years have gone on to try and adopt a minimalist approach to working. So to try and go paperless, to reduce redundant material in the office as much as I can, to refresh files, whether that be online files or physical files. Anyone who's been unfortunate enough to visit me in the office would probably admit that that's what my desk looks like. I keep nothing on the desk. It's just clutter free. There's a benefit to that, and again, this is backed up by science. There's about a 15 or 20% increase in productivity in people who keep their space as clutter free as possible. On the other hand, people who like a cluttered desk tend to be more creative. People who tend to keep a cleaner desk tend to be more productive. So a lot depends on whether you want to be creative or productive. But minimalist approaches, again, when you're planning the year ahead, we don't always get there, but at least start off with good intentions. And another tip I would give is the minimalist approach works well. Another one, and again, I've learned this the hard way through my own practices, and that's keeping track of things. So if you think about what we do mainly as an academic, it would be delivering content, assessing content, uploading content, and so on. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but I've often found myself thinking, did I upload that material? What's the CRN number for that class? Did I plan that terminal exam? Did I submit the repeat paper? So there's about 30 different pieces of information related to every module that I can see. everything about getting the program code, uploading information to Web for Faculty, looking at dates of MEBs, looking at repeat papers, even submitting your payment form. There's about 30 different pieces of information. So what I do for every module is either print this off or have an online version, and then just very quickly tick the box every time something is done. So I never have to second guess, did I upload that information? Have I written a repeat exam? Has the external examiner got back to me? And so on. These are things that have tripped me up in the past, and this certainly saves me a little bit of time. And whether, again, that's done in a boxed file or whether you do it digitally, having good systems of practice in terms of being able to track and record what you're doing certainly saves me time. So hopefully that could be useful to people. I'm happy to share that template if it's useful to other people as well. The other thing that I think really useful when it comes to looking at saving time and being more effective, we always tend to add stuff, and sometimes we can be more productive by actually taking stuff away. And again, I learned this over the years just by getting feedback from students. How do we organize information in Canvas to make it accessible to them and to make it easy to find? And by far the most overwhelming feedback that I've certainly got from classes down through the years is that stuff needs to be organized in terms of units rather than just lectures. So they want everything available in a particular unit. So I try and assemble mine in kind of 4 units if I can for every module, if the learning outcomes allow me to do that. So this would be the typical Canvas page: Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4. And when I first started using Canvas, maybe like many other people, I would then start uploading PowerPoint file for lecture 1, PowerPoint file for lecture 2, link to quiz, link to YouTube video, link to practice quiz, interesting podcast, and so on. So each unit becomes almost like an endless list of information and resources. Whereas now what I've started to do is to look at just doing one simple page for every unit. So when a student clicks on Unit 1, they just get one potential place to click, which is this one here. And then that brings them to a single page where everything they need is there. So whether it's an accompanying PDF that they need, whether it's the PowerPoint file for that particular unit, if it's an interactive quiz, if it's recorded information, everything is on a single page. And again, that saves me time because I know I just have to upload everything onto one single page. It saves them time because everything is easily accessible, and so on. So I've got two other questions. So again, this is a question around your practices and thinking about, is there a single change of practice that maybe you might undertake this year? And again, this is more for my benefit as well as maybe yours. I'd like to see what people are doing. I've shared some of my tips. We have a few more to do as well, but I'd like to see if there's maybe a single change of practice that you might plan to employ this semester that you haven't done. Is it to do with reducing clutter? Is it to do with being more time effective? Is it to do with trialing a new teaching and learning initiative? So if we maybe just pause for a sec, just be interesting to see what people think about their own practices and maybe what information they'd like to share around practices that they feel like they want to change. So tracking, organizing resources on Canvas, being more effective, managing time. Someone's saying they're not sure, which is perfectly okay. That's what this week is about, is trying to maybe think about what things you could change. Email streamlining, be more time effective, tracking what needs to be done, what has been done for each module, and so on. So tracking, time management, looking at maybe reducing emails, all very, very useful. What else have we got? Using a to-do list. Don't feel the need to respond to emails so quickly. It's a great one. Reduce content and unclutter Canvas. Focus on important aspects for students. Have a physical diary as well as an online diary. Excellent. Using a diary. Improving Canvas. Okay, great. some really good suggestions there. I think that's everyone. Asking, enabling students to input more into the discussion. Tracking, prioritizing, reducing content and uncluttering. Okay, some really, really good suggestions there. A lot of them around being more proactive, a lot of them around using focus time, planning, streamlining to do with emails and so on. So that's very useful. So thank you for that. Okay, so this is a shorter section of the talk, maybe 10 minutes or so, but just it's around the actual doing then. So everything up to now has been around planning. What can we do this side of the semester to think about inputting different and maybe better systems of practice? This morning, what we're going to focus on now for the remaining kind of 10 minutes or so again is doing. So we've covered time management in terms of planning, but what do we do with time management in terms of doing? I would suggest that you would use insights from Microsoft Office. We have the option of getting an insights email every week, which whether you like it or not, we're being tracked every time we're on Microsoft Office. So it knows when we're using emails, it knows when we're on Teams, it knows when we're in a meeting and so on. That has benefits and also downsides. But the benefits of it is that you do actually see how long you're spending doing each of the different tasks. So I would suggest if you want to be more effective with your time, that you sign up for insights from Microsoft Office. Some of you are probably getting it every Monday morning. This is an obvious one, but it's really important to mute notifications either through email, social media, phone. Just turn it off for the period of time that you're focused on the work. This might be a bit extreme, but I've seen people use these and they're very effective. If you're working in a busy office, or if you're at home, use noise cancelling headphones. The benefit of that is that you can't hear the washing machine beeping or the dishwasher needing emptying if you've got noise cancelling headphones. So another added benefit to it. Displaying your availability is very important. On Microsoft Teams, you can build in, obviously, you can make yourself accessible either through clicking I'm available or I'm busy or I'm offline. So take the time to do that, and at least it will limit the levels of distraction. Anyone who's involved in being more time effective would say that that batching is really important. So if you do have to focus on emails, then do all your emails together in an hour or 40-minute session, and don't be dipping in and out of them during the day. If you've got corrections to do, try and batch them. If you've got phone calls to do, try and batch them. It's really much more effective. Deadlines, this is something I always try and practice, is to always subtract time. So we always hit a deadline. So if we've got a deadline tomorrow morning, we'd find a way to get there. Whereas if we have a deadline for Friday, we'll find a time to get there on Friday. We'll always come in just at that time. So to try and trick yourself to be more effective, always subtract a day, a week, a month, depending on the length of the deadline. So that becomes your own personal deadline. It gives you so much more free time. Really important to take breaks. Cognitively, we're much more effective when we're not thinking about something. So even though you take a break, go for a walk, go for a cycle, go for a swim, do whatever it is during your working day, you'll find that your brain is actually actively working on problems and is processing things when you're not thinking about it. So you can be actually more time effective by building in sufficient breaks. This is just from, I spoke about insights. This is just, I got this morning, so I just took a quick screenshot of it. It tells you how often your calendar is free or when it's booked, and also it tells you how much time is spent in email. And frighteningly enough, even in the last few weeks when we're supposed to be on a break, my email time has increased from 1.5 to 6.5 hours per week in the last few weeks. So you can get some idea of how much time we do spend on emails. Yeah, this is my own personal impediment or barrier to really productive work. It has become such an almost overwhelming problem and not easy one to fix. Adobe, they did an analysis of their workforce, and they found that their employees, I think over 1,500 of them, spent 3+ hours on email per day. I know there's been other studies as well that would show that that's a typical. So things that we can do, looking at people who are a lot more effective at this than I am, is not obviously to check it first thing. And the benefit of doing that is that you're setting your own agenda for the day. Most of us, myself included, would check email first thing, and then 2 hours later you realize, no, I've got work to do. So you've actually spent the first 2 hours of your day working to someone else's agenda. Whereas if you make a period of in your day when you're going to check emails, at least when you start work first thing in the morning, you're working to your own agenda. So the biggest tip that I've read is that you don't check it first thing. Be ruthless with your emails. Read them, then either reply, forward, or delete them. A lot of people read emails, mark them as unread, and then they become another problem that you have to read again in a few hours' time. So deal with every email effectively, either reply, forward, or delete. This helps everyone. Really think about if you're copying people on an email, particularly in an email thread. Just be sensible about when it's appropriate to copy or not to copy. That really reduces the amount of emails that we get. Use shortcuts. There are keyboard shortcuts that you can use that will send off responses really quickly. There are templates that you can create, especially if you're writing the same type of email. The one that I've started using over the last few years, which has certainly transformed the amount of time that I've spent on emails, is just use dictation. If you put on the dictation tool, you can write a 10-line email in about 20 seconds just by literally calling out what you want to say, having a quick check over it, and then clicking send. So using dictation has been a game changer for me, at least. This again was from my own personal insight this morning, which again is a bit scary when you think about it. We've supposedly been on holidays. So in the last 4 weeks, I sent 141 and I read almost 1,500 emails in the last 4 weeks, just by randomly scrolling, checking the phone from time to time, logging on. It also gives you an insight into when you send and receive the most amount of emails. So I can imagine how much this would increase during a typical academic year if this is what happened in the month of August. But what's useful about it is that it does really reinforce to you how much time you're spending, when you're spending it, and could you be spending that time doing something else. So the last thing I want to focus on is feedback and assessment really quickly. This again is a real time burner. So when we're talking about trying to be productive, correcting exams and correcting assessments is another thing maybe to focus on. So maybe the first proactive thing to do, if the module descriptor allows you to do this, and I've learned this, one of the things I've really learned from working in the teaching and learning unit is that we generally over-assess either through content in exams, as in MCQs or so on, but also in practical work that we do. We really over-assess. So think about how can we consolidate and reduce the number of assessments. Less assessments for us to correct, less assessments for students to undertake. Where you can, use online submissions in Canvas, much faster, much more effective. Also using mixed modalities, so thinking about not having the exact same type of assessment reproduced throughout your entire module, so students are getting different flavors of assessments. For instance, one assessment could be MCQ based, one assessment could be submission of a project, so you're asking students to demonstrate different types of skills. Saving time, certainly again, this is about providing audio based feedback. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that students engage with audio feedback a lot more effectively because they can hear the tone of your voice. It can be very hard to send feedback and to have the emotive side of it displayed in the text. It's really hard. Whereas having audio-based feedback, students engage with it more because they can obviously hear the intonation and the emotive side of what you're telling them. Developing rubrics takes a lot of time up front, but saves so much time when you're actually assessing. If they're well designed and well developed, it means that instead of writing the same feedback in again and again, you can just click a checkbox or a number of checkboxes for the student. Giving class versus individual feedback, again, saves time, particularly for maybe lower stakes assessments. Employing more group work saves time because obviously you're correcting less material, and there are times when that's very useful and effective. And the last one is to do with peer assessment. Again, for low stakes or for formative assessments, it's very, very useful. Again, this is available on Canvas to set up an assessment which is peer assessed. So let's say for the early drafts of a particular assessment, the students can assess their own material by that option in Canvas. So just a few tips and tricks there to maybe help with the amount of time that we devote to giving feedback and assessment design. The last question, if you wouldn't mind, and we're almost done. So this is just a final question. So if there's a specific advice or tip or resource that you could recommend that has worked for you in the past. So the last question was to do with what are you planning to do for this semester? So what has worked for you in the past is the last question that I'd like to maybe pick your brains on before we close out for the morning session. So if there's something that you've done in the past that I haven't covered or that you're aware of that has worked particularly well for you, especially around the idea of assessment or around email or so on, it would be great just to get your insights in it. So there's a few coming in there already. Reducing content. Being more effective with time management is another advice or tip that has worked for you in the past. That's very useful to know. Might just give it another minute and see what comes back. Audio feedback. So glad to see someone has used audio feedback in the past. Other things that people have done, they've planned ahead. So dividing out content over 12 weeks, leaving time for review and revision. It's a great tip. Increasing the amount of autocorrect assessments on Canvas, peer feedback, don't feel obliged to be constantly on. I think that's a great tip. Peer feedback is an excellent tip as well, so I'm glad people are using that. Yeah, being constantly on is a useful one. There are opportunities in Canvas to display your office hours, which I think is really useful. So you can make yourself available to students and staff by saying, I'm available from these 2 hours on a Monday, these 2 hours on a Thursday, and outside of that, I'm not available. Try to reduce the number of times I use email. Don't overload the students with too many notes. Short, effective lists seem to work more. That's great. Pre-recorded presentations by students with live Q&A afterwards for assessment. Another excellent idea. Do not postpone email reply, do it right away. It's a good tips. I think we've covered that one, but great to have it validated here. The individual boxes for comments in Canvas for feedback are good to start some dialogue with students. We know feedback works better when it's a conversation, so it doesn't always need to be in person. So another great tip there. So yes, you can post a comment for an assignment in Canvas, and that prompts a student maybe to give feedback to their feedback, and as you say, that allows for a more effective dialogue and more efficient feedback. Okay, thanks for that, folks. So I'm at the end. I just want to thank you for signing in this morning. So I always like to finish by summarizing. So even if you've dipped in and dipped out this morning, it's just to say that over the last 30 or 40 minutes, I've tried to highlight the fact that the TLU exists as a resource, so please come and talk to us. Things that you can think about doing is undertaking a personal audit, thinking about your time management, maybe introducing small habits and small changes that can become transformative, looking at your scheduling practices, perhaps maybe adopting the minimalist approach, looking at setting up more efficient systems of tracking records so that you're not scrambling for did I or didn't I questions in week 6 or week 7. Thinking about your module design, and through the TLU, we'll also talk a little bit more as the weeks go on about more effective module design. We can help you with that. Thinking about your email habits, how you can improve those, and looking at your feedback approaches. So thank you for the time. Good luck with the weeks ahead, and thanks for your attention this morning.